Welcome to Founderline. I'm your host, Joe Beninato. Thanks for joining us. It's great to have you all with us. Our goal with Founderline is to provide a forum where people who are interested in startups can get their questions answered. So maybe you're thinking about starting a company, or you're a founder who's already working in a company. Maybe you're thinking about accepting a job at a startup. In any of those situations, if you have a question that you need answered, we're here to help you. This is a live show as always, and so in order for this to work, we need to hear from you. There are multiple ways to get in touch. You can call us. The number's toll-free 1-844-4FOUNDER. That's 844-436-8633. You can email your questions to help@founderline.com, or you can tweet questions to us. Our Twitter handle is @Founderline. With that, let's get started. Our guest today is Heidi Roizen, who's an operating partner at DFJ. She's been an entrepreneur, an investor, an educator with a bunch of different companies. Teamaker companies she started, Apple, Mobius Venture Capital, and Stanford University as well. Heidi, thanks for joining us. Welcome to Founderline.
Thanks for having me here.
So usually I like to start off just with a little bit of history, and just so everybody gets to know you a little bit. And I read up over the last couple of days. You've been here your whole life,
I
right?
have,
You're born
yes.
and bred in Silicon Valley,
Yes, absolutely.
which is amazing. And right now working with both DFJ and with Stanford, right?
Right.
So maybe walk us through what you're up to right now. What's keeping you busy?
Oh, this is keeping me busy.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it is great to be here. Look, I spend my day with a venture capital firm here in the Valley, DFJ. It's got a long history. I actually went to Stanford as an undergrad, and in my freshman year, I met Tim Draper. So maybe that's why I'm there. Maybe I know some secrets about Tim.
Oh,
no,
really? Do you have photos?
I probably have photos. Actually, he dated my freshman roommate,
oh,
so
really?
that may be the real secret here. No, I got to know Tim. We actually ran a small business together in between undergrad and graduate school, so I know Tim very well.
Oh, great.
Then after business school, I started this company, Teamaker, with my brother. And that was 14 years of my life. So somewhere during that period, I raised venture capital, and I raised it from Ann Winblad, Hummer Winblad.
Sure.
Was their first investment. And I raised
funds first investment?
Yes,
oh, wow.
very first.
Oh,
and
wow.
I raised my second round from Tim Draper. So after selling that successfully, going off to Apple, then I became a venture capitalist and ultimately got recruited to DFJ. So funny how the same people keep coming back around in your life.
Yeah, no, it's great. And then teaching at Stanford as well.
Yes, yeah, I started that about 5 years ago. I joined the Stanford Technology Ventures program, where I'm a lecturer, and I run a class called Spirit of Entrepreneurship.
So if you're at Stanford or you're thinking about entrepreneurship, when's your class?
Come
is
take
it in
my
the
class.
fall, or is it?
It is taught all year, MSc 178 for those of you who are Stanford students. But for those of you who are not Stanford students, you can see a big part of the class as well. The class is a conversation around a lecture series. The lecture series is actually available online.
Oh, cool.
At etl.stanford.edu, which stands for Entrepreneurial Thought Leaders.
Yeah.
So etl.stanford.edu. We archive all the past lectures, and the lectures go up one day after they are presented. And we have just fantastic speakers. So it's a really great way to get the experience without necessarily being on campus at Stanford.
Awesome. Well, no, that's really cool, and it's so great to have Stanford so close by in Silicon Valley, right?
Conveniently located.
So much stuff going on in the startup world there.
Yeah.
So I had another question around. There's been a lot of talk around sexism in Silicon Valley recently, and very high-profile situations with CEOs and others that have been going on, and we won't get into any of those specific topics, but I know you've written about this and have experienced it firsthand, and so you can go into whatever level of detail you want, but maybe talk about what's happened and what you've experienced in the past, and then let's talk a little bit about what we can do about it. As a
I have a
group of people who are trying to promote startups and entrepreneurship.
Got a lot of thoughts about this, a lot of experience, and frankly,
a lot of it
I don't.
Heidi,
A lot of it I don't go. You don't go there. I mean, one of the things that I have really felt is it's very hard to comment on anybody else's situation because I wasn't there and I didn't know,
Yeah.
right? I don't know what happened to other people. I
Yeah.
only know what happened to me. And so when I decided to finally write a blog post about it, in fact, I joked that it's so long since those things happened. Probably the perpetrators are, dead for all I know. But those things happened a while back. But I thought, I was reading a lot. People were asking me about my opinions, and I heard a lot about people saying, "Oh, that stuff doesn't really happen. Oh, she's making that up. Oh, she's doing it to get attention." And I thought, I think people don't understand that these things happen. They
Yeah.
happen to me. They happen to every woman I know who's been an entrepreneur. When you sit around and you open a bottle of wine and you talk about things that have happened to you, these stories come out.
Wow.
So, I blogged
Without
about
exception.
mine without exception. Honest to God,
amazing.
without exception. And I blogged about the things that happened to me, everything from just, rude comments to a man taking my hand and putting it down his pants at a dinner meeting.
Yeah,
I'm not kidding.
I read that.
It's rather a shocker.
Yeah.
To just, just people saying things like, I was pregnant and I was raising venture, and a venture capitalist said to me, "Well, you're going to have a baby. I mean, you're going to be really distracted from being a CEO after that. How can we be sure you're going to actually pay attention to your business?"
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, these things happen. And I think that one of the reasons, what I decided is if I wrote about it, and I don't have an axe to grind. These happened long ago, so it's not like I'm trying to get, anybody in trouble for their behavior. But I thought, well, if it's happened to me and you're another female entrepreneur, at least you can say, okay, it happens. You pick up, you move forward, move on,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I've actually gotten some criticism from people who say, you shouldn't just say move on, you should say call out the behavior. And I really respect those women who do call it out. I do think that there is a backlash, and the comment I made at the time is when you're an entrepreneur and you're struggling for your daily existence and you're trying to raise money or something, sometimes when you call it out, there are repercussions. That's life. That's the world. I
Yep.
wish it weren't that way.
Yep.
But so, in my small way, what I try to do is support those women who are brave enough to say, hey, this happened to me, and at least, be supportive of them.
And have people, since you wrote about it, have people reached out? And
Oh, lots of people have reached out to me. The most interesting class of people are fathers of young 20s aged women. And many fathers have reached out to me to say, oh my God, it never occurred to me that this kind of stuff happens. I don't think about it. And now all of a sudden I'm worried about it
Yeah.
because they think about their daughters.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
it's kind of an interesting thing that's really been the demographic that has spoken up.
That is pretty interesting. So what can we do about it? Like, what,
I
especially
think-
as a man in Silicon Valley, like we're not aware that this stuff is going on,
Right,
right?
right.
I mean, the perpetrators are aware, apparently.
Yeah, but even the perpetrators don't get, they're honest to God, some people who don't understand that, for example, I'll give you a generic example. This has happened so many times. You're a woman, you go to a man and he may be an angel investor or whatever, and you give him your pitch, and then you get an email from him later and he says, I'm not going to fund you, but if you ever want to go on a date with me, that would be awesome, right? I can't tell you how many people think there's nothing inappropriate about that. Hey, we're all people, we're young, and I would say, honestly, the truth is, it is awkward. It
Yeah.
is awkward if you're trying to raise money and someone says, I don't want to fund you, but I'd like to date you, or worse, and there's one going around right now where he said, no, but let's have sex.
Yeah.
I won't leave the town until we have sex. That's really awkward,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And just saying, a lot of people say, oh, it's just men, I jokingly say, testosterone, dangerous drug, right? Be careful of all those people who are on it. But unfortunately, this stuff happens. What can we do about it? Well, the first thing is just recognize that if you are, if you are a man and you're dealing with a woman, recognize that those sorts of things should be left out of the workplace if you can. If it's it's kind of like, please try to not say those things.
Yeah.
Please try to make us not uncomfortable.
yeah.
I would also say for men, think about what it would be like if you walked into a room of 15 people and you were the only man. You'd feel a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So recognize that. I think this is one of the things too, is the vast majority of men are not, they're not bad about, this is not, it's not like all men are scum and this is awful. Usually it's either one or two bad apples, right? One bad apple, or it's also this unintentional thing. And this is the thing I tell my students all the time. I say, look, here's how a typical Silicon Valley startup works, right? It's 3 guys. They all live in a dorm or a frat. They decide to start a company.
Yeah.
They start the company. They get some funding. They move into a house in Palo Alto. They get 7 more guys. They are all like living in this house in Palo Alto. Let me
Eating
tell you
pizza,
something, eating pizza,
sleeping
not
on the-
washing
yeah.
the floor. I'm sorry
Yeah.
to be stereotypical,
Yeah.
but not washing anything.
The floor.
Yeah, not washing
Not
anything.
washing
Not washing
anything,
the
yeah,
sheets, not
yeah.
washing their clothes.
Their bodies.
Yeah, not washing anything. No, the point is just, if all of a sudden then they go to hire their first woman, and you're the first woman, and there's 12 guys working out of a house they live in, trust me, it's already kind of a little bit intimidating, even
No.
if nobody meant any harm,
Yep.
right? Any more so than if there's 12 women who organize something and you're the lone man walking into that, you'll feel a little different. So I think part of it is just that act locally, think globally, act locally. What can I personally do
Yeah.
to try to help this situation? One of the things I think for anyone who's in a position in the Valley to hire people, I told you I had a lot to say on this. I'm going to stop after this.
No, this is great.
But make sure there's a woman in the mix. Whoever's doing the recruiting, say, I want to see a woman in the mix of candidates.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times people say, oh, they don't have that spec. I hear this about women on boards, right? Oh, we tried having a woman. It didn't work. Oh, I'm sorry. So you had one, and then we're all the same?
Yeah.
It means if one didn't work, no one else can possibly work.
No,
It's
that's
kind of
bad.
crazy. So it's like,
That's bad too.
try to change. Just do one
Yeah.
thing.
I remember at Presto, I got called out by somebody for not hiring women. It was online a while ago, and my management team had more women than men on it.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, go look at
Go
the
look.
history. Like,
Yeah.
the record's there. Like,
Yeah.
don't be stirring up controversy
Right.
like that.
Right.
But I do think it's really important for, especially for men who are in positions of authority, like either, when people are fundraising or hiring or whatever it might be, to be more aware of this. And
actually, there's a good business reason for it too, right? It isn't just about, oh, let's be nice to poor girls, they can't get jobs otherwise, right? There is actually a good reason for this,
Yeah.
which is diversity brings better decision making. It's, and there's tons of research about this. And I would even argue, I bet at Presto, one of the reasons you probably had a lot of women is I bet women were a lot of your buyers, right?
They were.
Because they were buying it for their elderly or for their parents.
We called the target customer Linda. Like
Yeah.
we had a
Yeah.
name. She was a 50-year-old mom with a couple of kids and aging
Yep.
parents, right?
Yep.
And that was Linda.
Yep.
And so and a number of the execs were Lindas.
Yep.
And we used to joke about it, right?
But that's the thing is, how are you going to know your customer if you're not representing your customer at all
Yeah.
in your management team, on your board, in
Yeah.
your customer service, in your sales? I just think it's smart business.
Yep.
And I think and that's where I push, especially public companies, to say, because this is women in governance is another issue, say, put out the data that shows that having women and any form of diversity on your board leads to better results, and then you'll get that diversity. And the data is there, but it hasn't been as widely distributed as it needs to be.
No, it's great, and we could spend all day, but it's an important topic, and I think even today I saw Jessica Livingston from Y Combinator.
Mm-hmm.
She had an incident yesterday, like some guy trying to pick her up on the street.
God.
And he was a VC. And I was just thinking, he's a pretty bad VC because he doesn't know who Jessica is, and then he just probably pissed her off. So you can
Yeah.
imagine that firm's not getting any more YC companies. But
Yeah.
anyway, all right. Well, and maybe more will come up as people chime in with questions. So the other thing I wanted to talk about briefly was the ecosystem with startups and raising money and the process. I mean, obviously, it's continually changing, but especially in recent years, it's
Right.
really started to change.
Right.
Like think back to
Right.
Teammaker. I don't know if you guys just bootstrapped
We
it. And,
bootstrapped.
were you selling stuff to?
Oh yeah, we bootstrapped for 3 years before we ever. Actually, we bootstrapped for 6 years before we ever raised.
Yeah,
venture.
that's like unheard of, right?
Yeah.
So maybe share some thoughts about how the ecosystem has changed. The process for raising money
Mm-hmm.
and the experience of entrepreneurs as they go through those fundraising
Mm-hmm.
experiences.
I think that that the environment has really changed, and there are a lot more options available, and I think that's really great. It's great for entrepreneurs. It's more entrepreneurship is better, right?
Yep.
It doesn't mean it's all going to succeed, but generally as a society, I think the more we can help people try to launch solutions to problems, the better off we're going to be.
Yep.
That said, I'm going to sound like an old fart when I say this, but I think one of the great things about Teammaker is no one funded us in the beginning, right? Nobody would give us money, so we had to go earn it from customers. And there are many benefits to earning money from customers. First of all, it's non-dilutive, right? You're not giving up equity. Second of all, it validates the company, right? Third of all, it is the thing by which you will ultimately be judged, right? So you're getting revenue ultimately when you do want to go out perhaps to raise capital to, change the trajectory of your growth or whatever. They will look at your revenue. It's a very validating thing. And you learn, when you're the CEO and you have to actually make money from customers, you have to go talk to customers, and that's hard.
God
and
forbid.
I think it's good for you, right?
Yeah.
So I like the old-fashioned way, right? Now, I think there are many other, for example, though, I think there are other ways to do that, right? For example, look at Kickstarter, right? Kickstarter really is raising money from customers. It's just sort of a different version of that.
It's like pre-sales, essentially.
It's like pre-sales, right? You got to go pitch the product, you got to make it happen. So I think it's really exciting. I mean, to me, I think that, obviously I'm a venture capitalist, so I'm going to tell you there's still a role for traditional venture, and I fully believe that, and I wouldn't be one if I didn't think so.
Sure.
But I think there's a glorious abundance of other sorts of options, and I'm really excited about that. I mean, the one thing I will say, though, about any form of fundraising, other than customers, is when you take money from an investor, you are putting yourself on a path to need to generate liquidity, right?
Yep.
And a lot of entrepreneurs just don't understand that, right? When you take money from customers, you can do that all day long. You can own the company 100%, you can run it for years, you can take home the profits if you want, you can do whatever you want if it succeeds, right? If it fails, you can go get a job.
Yeah.
But, those are your options. As soon as you start taking equity capital in, you are committing to deliver a return on that capital.
Right.
And generally speaking, that means you're going to go public, which is pretty damn rare. You're going to sell the company, which is hard, or in some rare cases I've seen people, repurchase the stock, do it out of proceeds. I mean, those are icky and very rare, right?
Yeah.
So I just think entrepreneurs should think about that. If I bring the money in, I'm putting myself on a path that means I have to exit someday.
Makes sense.
It's not for everybody.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I love the idea about selling to customers, and there's a great line. I forget who said this, but it was something about, someone was talking to an entrepreneur. He said, the difference between you and that guy running the convenience store down the street? He has revenue. You don't.
Yeah.
Right? And so you can make fun of him, but he's selling stuff people want, and you should go do that.
Right.
So,
so true.
All right. Well, let's see if we can help some people out. Once again, we'd love to hear from you. You can call us 1-844-4Founder. You can email help@founderline.com, or you can tweet to @founderline. So let's dive into some questions here. We've got
anybody out there yet?
Yeah, there's a bunch of emails that have come in. So this one's from Miguel. I'm incredibly shy and very uncomfortable in groups bigger than a few people. I'm also very sharp, hardworking, and have lots of experience building successful companies behind the scenes. So not the CEO sounds like, but maybe an engineer, I would guess.
Right. Yep.
Is my shyness something I need to correct?
That's a really hard question.
Yeah.
I think that there are so many other ways to be in touch with people beyond face-to-face, and I think some people are intimidated by shyness. So I would say, first of all, the answer is no, not 100%. There are people who are tremendously shy who get ahead in the world. They find ways to do things through, I think, for example, online communication, right? Someone who might be shy to ask something in person can do it online. I think they go find work environments where they can be in a small group and get to know people. And so I think there are many, many ways to do it. But I would also argue that there are some tricks to overcoming shyness that I think are helpful. And I think that if you can do this, you will, you'll do better in life. So for example, when I tell people are intimidated about walking into, for example, an event, right? You're going to, TechCrunch or Launch or a YC event or whatever it is, and you're thinking, oh my God, there are all these people, and I don't know, there's something in your head that says everyone else is, better than you and smarter than you or something, or you're afraid to talk to people. The first thing to remember is pretty much everyone feels that way.
Yep.
Like pretty much everyone feels that way.
It's like the first day of school.
And even
everybody.
Exactly, and even extroverts. Like I'm an extrovert. I pretty much can tell you that a half an hour before any event starts, I'm thinking to myself, maybe I'd rather stay home and do email, right? Because it is a little intimidating. So number one is just recognize Everybody has that same issue. Then the second thing is, the goal is, it's not a contest to see how many business cards you can collect, right? The goal is not to go in there and work the room and be the celebrity. The goal is go in, I was like, find one interesting person. Now, how do you know they're interesting? Well, sometimes you know they're interesting because you get a thing ahead of time and you can see who's attending. And you go, I'm going to meet that one person. And I'm going to meet that one person because we went to school together, but not the same year. Or I'm going to meet that one person because they work at Google and I would love to know about what it's like to work at Google. Whatever it is, identify one person, go up and meet them. And it's actually very compelling. You know, if somebody walks up and says, I just went through the list of everybody coming today and you were the person I picked that I wanted to meet and here's why. That's really compelling, right? That's a great way to start a conversation.
Absolutely.
So my feeling is if you break it down and you say, even though I'm shy, I can do this with one person, go practice. You know, the other thing is, and I say this to entrepreneurs, when you're fundraising, don't start your first pitch with the person you most want to have invest with you, right? Go practice on some people that you don't care if they say no.
Yes.
So kind of the same thing is go practice. But, you know, I do think you can, I've always been extroverted, so to me it hasn't been as difficult, but I can tell you that I used to be very afraid of public speaking. So even though I was fine, like, going somewhere and talking. I mean, the first time I was on a panel, I was shaking so hard the person next to me thought I was having like a seizure or something. Said, "Can I help you?" And I just thought the only way to get over this is to just go, keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. Start with small events. You know, go speak to like grade school students.
I still get nervous, you know, when
I'm nervous right now.
Maybe not so much with this because now we've done it enough times, but you know, if I have to get up in front of a big crowd, you know, you're just like, all right, I don't want to trip over myself, you know, I don't want to do this.
Yeah,
so.
no, it's scary stuff, right?
Well, hopefully, Miguel, hopefully that helps out. Next time we're at an event, you know, come up and introduce yourself and say hello.
Say hi.
We won't bite. So. Let's see, we've got another one here. I don't know this name. It's Ibiyinka, I believe. One thing I've noticed is that all these venture capital companies have all their details online, but no email addresses to contact them. How do they get to know the viable startups on the market?
That's a great question.
Now, this came in earlier, and I actually went and checked, and you guys have your email addresses online. Do. So was there a discussion about that? Like, should we do it?
Decision. Purposeful decision. And however, in fact, here's an interesting story. Number one, we have our email addresses online. And number two, we do not have a general email address. We used to have a general email address.
Those are the worst.
Info or, you know, deals at dfj.com.
And
everything goes in there. And we said, you know what? The reality is, number one filter for an entrepreneur is you have to know who you're pitching. And you don't pitch a firm. Like DFJ has our principles and whatever, but it's the individuals. So I always tell entrepreneurs, figure out which individual is the right individual for you across a bunch of firms, right? And if you go on our website and you look at how to submit a deal, it's going to say, read all the bios, look at the companies they're invested in, pick the one that's closest to you, and send them an email. And here are all their email addresses. I think it's an odd, you know, it's an interesting decision because I think part of the reason VCs don't put their email addresses out there is they think, oh, I'm going to get a whole bunch of stuff that's not appropriate for me. I don't know. The answer to me is if you do, just write back and say, that's not appropriate for me. I don't know why that's so hard, right? I mean, we try to respond to everyone. It shouldn't be that difficult. The vast majority of the deals we get are not going to be appropriate for us, right? You know, it's wrong sector, wrong, right? Well, those are even the ones we look, you know, I mean, the ones that are sort of cold incoming, a lot of times it's just, you know, they're countries we don't invest in, or they're sectors we don't invest in, or they're, you know, they're stages we don't invest in. And so, you know, I'd rather just tell someone, hey, not a sector we cover, I'm sorry, but I'd much rather have that email response than just have it kind of go into a black hole. So every venture firm gets to make up their own rules, but those are ours.
All right. Well, hopefully that helps. And, you know, I think it's true. There are some firms that kind of hide their info and make it harder, which I don't understand given the business they're in. But,
yeah, I don't either.
So I understand we have Mitch calling from Hong Kong. So we're gonna switch over and do the sponsor stuff, and then do the Ask the Lawyer segment, if that's okay. And then we'll get back. We'll have more time for questions on the other side.
Great.
So you know, I'd like to thank our sponsors. We wouldn't be able to do this show without the help from our two amazing sponsors, Oric and Ustream. I'll start with Ustream. You know, we've been working with them since the show began. to bring this to you live every week, and have been in touch with Brad, their CEO, as well as a bunch of other people on their team. And it's been a great experience. We were up and running in 10 minutes, literally, from the time we started playing around with it. It's worked flawlessly, both here as well as when we were on the road in Paris and London. And they keep reaching out. In fact, I have a call next week to chat about some of the product features and see if there are things they can improve in the product UI and those sorts of things. So really, really great experience. If you're thinking about doing any live events, maybe communicating to your customers, or even doing a show, a webcast from your house or whatever it might be, go check out Ustream. You can find out more at their website. It's ustream.tv. I'd also like to thank the team over at Oric. We've been working with Mitch Zuckley and his team over there. I've worked with them on multiple companies now, and they've been early and very excited sponsor of the show. I always tell people one of the most important decisions when you're starting a company is to get a great lawyer. You need to, they're one of your most important advisors. And yes, they're going to take care of the legal paperwork and incorporating and all that sort of stuff. But more importantly, they're going to have seen many, many more deals than you have seen, whether it's an acquisition or a partnership or a hiring of an executive or whatever it might be. That is one of your most critical advisors. So make sure you get somebody great. The team over at Oric is fantastic, and you can find out more about them. Go to oric.com, and you can read more about the firm as well as the people who are there. So with that, let's switch over to our Ask the Lawyer segment, and we're very fortunate. Every week we have Mitch Zuckley, who's the chairman and CEO of Oric. He joins us by phone. Today, I understand he's in Hong Kong. So Mitch, are you with us today?
Joe, great to talk with you. Hey, Heidi.
Hi.
Hey, Mitch, a little bit of delay here, so hopefully that won't get too much in the way. But, we do this every week where we have a topic we cover from a legal perspective just for a few minutes. And we've got, both Mitch and Heidi here to offer their perspectives. And today I thought it'd be interesting to talk about partnerships. And at some point in the life of most startups, a conversation around a partnership comes in, and in most cases, those are typically a smaller startup interfacing with a larger company. It doesn't have to be a big gorilla like Microsoft or Intel or somebody like that, but usually it's small company working with larger company. And Mitch, maybe you could start us off with, if you're a startup thinking about setting up a partnership, what sorts of things should you be considering when you're talking to a larger company about a partnership of some sort?
Thanks for asking, Joe. I love this question. It's one of the most important questions we get all the time. And the first thing I'd say is it's critical not to win the battle, but lose the war. And by that I mean some startups are so desperate to sign up a key customer that they're willing to agree to terms and commercial agreements that can really reduce the value of the company and their prospects down the road. So, for example, it's not uncommon to ask to give up rights of first offer or first refusal to acquire the company, or broad exclusivity provisions, or most favored customer provisions. And the bottom line is those can really be detrimental, particularly a right of first offer with respect to an acquisition. So I try very hard to not yield on those terms and ultimately hamstring the business. The second thing, I'd say it's critically important to find an internal champion. Most often a deal is not going to get signed unless there's somebody internally driving it as a big company. And keeping the dialogue open and being honest with that person is really critical. Third thing I'd say is leverage your network. And you've got a board, you've got friends that are other founders, you've got counsel. Ask them, get their guidance. And last thing I'd say is that be prepared. Most large companies are going to ask about the viability of a smaller company, and most smaller companies understandably don't want to reveal their financials. But you can get around that concern about your viability by making sure you're willing to put source code in escrow, or pointing to other large companies to place faith in you, or maybe giving limited financial information about your last round, something like that. So I love this question. You could talk about it for a long time, but those are the biggest issues, I think, Joe.
All right, great. Well, so Heidi, you've been through this on both sides of the aisle, as they say. So what would you add to that?
I mean, I think that was fantastic advice, and I would just add, don't do a bad business deal because it's going to make a great press release, right? And people are so excited to say we're doing business with this or that or the other. The other thing is that when you leave things fuzzy, big companies can kill you with kindness, right? You can be a 10-person, 5-person startup, and all of a sudden they say, we want to do something with you. And they'll send 30 people from the headquarter office who want to spend a week with you to learn, they can do all sorts of things like that, right? They can run a trial, and they can spend a lot of money running a trial. We had a situation like this with a company with Best Buy, and Best Buy, very well-meaning, did a trial with 5 stores and then wanted to do 25 and said to us, well, you have to do the 25. And the problem is we literally couldn't afford our side of that equation, right? We needed some revenue to come in before we could have our side of that equation work.
Oh, they wanted the 25 to be free.
Well, sure, because we're still in the test period.
Yeah,
this means it's going well, right? We want to quintuple it. Well, we couldn't afford that.
Right.
And so then you kind of get stuck. The final thing I would say about it is, and again, this was another lesson from Best Buy, which, by the way, was a great partner, but even with great partners, you learn some of these lessons, is understand what success looks like for them before you start a trial.
Yeah.
I think it's so often that you do a deal and you think they're so cool, they're so big, and you never say, at the end of the trial, what would be the metrics we would have to hit to get what kind of order from you?
Right.
Right?
Right.
If you don't know that, and they say, well, let's just do a trial and let's just see how it works, and you have no idea how they're evaluating what you're doing, you just don't know where to go turn or what to go work on or where to go spend your money.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. Totally agree. So, Mitch, any closing thoughts on partnerships?
No, I think Heidi nailed it. It was great talking with you, Joe. Look forward to talking with you next week, and have a good one.
All right, thanks a lot, Mitch.
Thank you.
That's Mitch Zuckley from Oric. Always great to have him involved, and the guy never sleeps. Like he was emailing me like 4 hours ago. I think it's 4 in the morning or something. So thank you, Mitch. And once again, you can call us with your questions. The number is 1-844-4FOUNDER. Email is help@founderline.com, and you can tweet to @founderline. So now we got a full half hour to plow through these questions. We got quite a bit coming in. So let's see. This one is from Gideon. What tools are there for women entrepreneurs? What tools are missing that would help most? How can we get more women founders in Silicon Valley? So I'm not sure what he means by tools exactly, but I don't know.
I think tools. I think there are. Look, I think for women, this is always a challenging question. Women and technology, which is, you need to be part of the fabric, right? You need to be in, and frankly, the fabric is mostly male. So the idea of segmenting yourself off and being separate is not a good one. You need to throw yourself in and be part of those clubs, organizations, events where the people who are moving the world are there, and right now in tech, a lot of them are men. So go there. But I also think that there are things that, there's a group, for example, Women Who Code, fantastic group, great women, they get together, they have speakers, they talk about issues, and maybe there's a little different focus on that. Maybe you try to help each other out, right? I think that for women, you need to do both. You need to have your mainstream thing, and then you need to have that place where you go and pay, and kind of hang with your tribe a little bit and learn from them and help each other out. I also think that's another thing women need to do is help each other out, right? You have to make a commitment to say, I'll take that meeting, I'll try a little harder because it's a woman. I'll do something a little extra. I will go that extra mile to do it. And, I don't think I think that it's partially a pipeline issue. Historically, looking back, technology entrepreneurship was a field for people with STEM degrees.
Yeah.
And
we had a STEM problem.
And if you have a STEM problem, then it's a supply issue, right? Now, I happen to be a creative writing major from college, so So my brother was the programmer and I was the everything else.
Yeah.
So I'm, I was unusual not only for my vintage being a female entrepreneur, but also being a non-technical female entrepreneur.
Yep.
But I think that, now we're changing that. Number one, there are more women in STEM programs. And number two, there are more women who work with, who work on teams who can be founders who aren't necessarily the technologists. And I think the more and more we see the consumerization of technology, the more you will find women founders who are using technology to, to create markets, but they're not building the technology.
Yeah.
I used to say, I don't need to know how to build a car to know how to drive a car, right? I don't need to know how this works to be a killer user of it.
Yeah.
So I think that's where the shift is now slowly occurring.
All right. Well, good question, Gideon. Let's see. We have an email here from one of our regulars. We have a regular.
Okay. Oh, cool.
Larry from Yuba City.
Hi, Larry.
So Larry says, first off, Heidi is amazing.
Aw, thank you.
Joe, thanks for getting her on the show. How important is the state of incorporation? There seems to be an investor preference for Delaware. Is that generally preferred, or are there other good choices?
That's a super great question, and I am not qualified. Mitch should have answered this question.
Yeah.
So, with my limited knowledge on the topic, Delaware has been the traditional place, right? They've been corporate friendly. They've been the place you do this. I've recently heard all sorts of things from, you shouldn't be a C Corp, you should be something else, you shouldn't incorporate in Delaware, you should incorporate offshore. There are all sorts of, schools of thought.
Yep.
My answer is, do not count on my, response as your, I may play a doctor on television, but I'm not one in real life.
Yeah.
This is where lawyers, and going back to that point about it is so important to have counsel.
Yeah.
It's so important to have the right counsel. I see this with entrepreneurs all the time, where they come in. And I remember you give somebody a term sheet, and it's your standard like vanilla thing, and they come back and it's all marked up, and you go, "What happened here?" And they go, "Oh, my uncle is a divorce attorney." Right? You're like, "Yeah, I can tell because it looks like you're mad at me," and
that's
this
horrible.
is that thing where they're trying to save money and they go to someone who's not in this business.
That
and
just
I would
makes
just say,
you look bad. I mean,
oh, it's bad at so many levels, but people are well-meaning. It's not that they're trying, to do bad things.
Right.
But I would say this is one case. I call it corporate hygiene. But your articles of incorporation, how you split your equity early on, your employment agreements, your IP protection, all of those things. This wheel has already been invented over and over and over and over again.
Yep.
And like this, interestingly though, it's a question because I can't come and tell you, oh, I do this all the time and it should be a Delaware C Corp, right?
Yeah.
I know there's some school of thought that this is shifting.
yeah.
But I can tell you that the first thing I would do is pick up the phone and call Oric.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and we just went through this when we incorporated Founderline, and still Delaware was the right answer.
Right.
But we're an S Corp because it's a little bit different structure than a technology startup with stock options and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, talk to your lawyer. There's definitely a preference for Delaware. I think it has to do with like tax issues and
it's really about lawsuits. It's about litigation.
Yeah,
it's about the court system and how the court works there. The other thing, S Corp versus C Corp, that's also around classes of stock, right?
Exactly.
You can only have multiple classes under certain types of corporate structures. And the problem with venture capitalists is they want preferred shares, and in order to have preferred shares, you need to have multiple classes. So that's why you have to do that.
Exactly. So Larry, before you start whatever you're working on next, like, go get a good lawyer. They'll walk you through it. It could be, LLC is the right thing depending on what you're doing. And we are not lawyers.
We are not lawyers.
This is not legal advice. Go talk to your lawyer and
we
see.
don't even play them on television.
That's right. We let Mitch handle all that stuff for us.
Although one more thing about this topic is for those of you who are starting companies and are even thinking about raising either from angels or from venture capitalists, there's a fantastic book on the topic. It's written by Brad Feld and Jason Mendelson called Venture Deals, How to Be Smarter Than Your Lawyer and Venture Capitalist and whatever. That doesn't mean you shouldn't get a lawyer, but it is a really fantastic book. Those guys are exceptional, and it's written in a way that's easy to understand. And I always tell entrepreneurs, take the couple hours and the $20 or whatever the book costs and go do that. Because you can't just delegate to someone else. You need to understand enough about this to do it yourself.
Your former partners, right?
They are my former
Yeah.
partners.
So,
Yeah.
in fact, I just was exchanging emails with Brad yesterday.
Yeah.
So.
And Jason's getting married next weekend.
No.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm
That poor woman.
I'm gonna go cheer him on.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's in Boulder, or
Yeah.
oh great. Well, congratulations, Jason. Have a great time. Let's see. We have an email from Daniel. How do you make a decision on an investment? Is it mostly about the product, market, team, or other? All of the above, maybe.
All the above. I have a long answer, but I'm going to try to make it a slightly shorter answer. But I'll start by saying when I was a venture capitalist, when I was an entrepreneur, the way I thought venture worked is it's like the bank. Like they have an infinite amount of money. I don't. I go apply. I tell them what I want, and then they give me the money. And that turned out to be a really naive view of the world. And it took me 9 months to raise my first round of venture.
That's how AngelList works, isn't
Yeah,
it? You
exactly.
just put in your request and then the money
The problem is
gets
when you're
wired
a
in.
venture capitalist, you actually have a limited pool of capital. You are trying to deploy it over a small number of investments, usually about 25 to 30 in a fund. You're trying to diversify usually by sector, by stage, by time, sometimes by geography. And so and every time you meet with an entrepreneur, at least this is classic venture, so I'm not talking about, 500 startups or other things. I'm talking about kind of like DFJ. You're thinking, are you the one person or maybe one of the two people I'm going to write a check to this year?
Yeah.
And what are you looking for? Well, it's the magic in venture. It's why sometimes it works and it doesn't, and it's why it's beautiful that there's lots of us, because if one doesn't like you, somebody else might. But definitely looking, for me, number one is the person, is the entrepreneur. Are they passionate about what they're doing? Are they articulate? Are they leaning in and willing to learn? Are they knowledgeable about their field?
Yeah.
Right? I remember in the dot-com boom, somebody was doing something, and I said, I don't think you know enough about this industry. And he was insulted, and he said, I have spent 6 weeks studying this industry.
6 whole weeks.
I won't say what graduate school he went to, but it's one that I went to also. So he was like, I spent 6 weeks studying this market. How dare you? And I'm thinking, yeah, okay. So I think you really need to know what is the problem you're trying to solve, and be able to articulate that. So to me, it's about that person. It's about the team the person forms. Also, if you are great but you can't build a team, you're probably not going to get very far. And that's really hard to tell, especially the earlier stage the company is.
Of course.
The farther along it is, the more you can actually get those people in a room and see how they work and how they interact with each other.
Right.
And then, of course, the market, big market, small market. When you're a fund like DFJ and your check size is, couple million at the low end, maybe $1 million, all the way up to, 15 or 20 at the growth fund, you need big outcomes to have venture returns, right? You can't put in $1 million and get 2 back and feel good about it, right? So we're not really the kind of fund that's going to fund the widget, right? You want to fund foundational companies, and I think especially at DFJ where we've done things like Tesla, SpaceX, Solar City,
Alon's
Box.
been very good to you.
Yeah, he's a great. Talk about betting on the right person.
He needs to start more companies.
Yeah, we're waiting for him to start some more.
Oh, I'm sure there's
Although
3 or 4
I don't know
more
if I'm quite ready to invest in colonizing Mars yet.
Yeah.
Although that's really SpaceX
Or-
really was, sort of like he thought, okay, I want to colonize Mars. I'm paraphrasing this, of course. I
Yeah.
want to colonize Mars. How will I get there? I need rockets. They're too expensive. So in a funny way, SpaceX is ultimately, his plot to
That's
colonize Mars.
amazing.
But yeah, no, it is very much about the people. And then the other thing is it's also chemistry. And that is the thing that is so frustrating as an entrepreneur, right? As an entrepreneur, I'd go in, I'm like, hey, I've already built this company. When we raised our first round, we'd already had $3 million in revenue. I'm like, I've already built this company. I know what I'm talking about. Fund me, damn it.
Yeah.
And on the flip side is somebody thinking, well, maybe I just don't like your style, or maybe I don't, and that's hard to hear, right? It's kind of like dating, right? You don't want to hear like, oh, there's no chemistry. But really the venture entrepreneur relationship is chemistry, and in both directions, by the way.
I think it's a lot like dating, in fact.
Yeah.
And not to go back to our previous topic, but an investor has to fall in love with your company, with you, with what you're doing. I always tell people, if you meet an investor, and they're not interested in sports at all, and you have a sports-related company,
Yeah.
they're not going to fund you.
Yeah.
Like maybe if you're incredibly profitable and no one's heard about you before, but
Yeah.
they have to be passionate
Yeah.
about it. You know, if they're into photography, they're more inclined to fund a photography startup.
Always easier to get somebody who understands the product to also fund it. But that said, there are companies we fund that aren't necessarily things that we ourselves are the user for. And in fact, I
Right.
think it can sometimes be dangerous when you're like, oh, I'm the target customer.
Yeah.
Like, not exactly. But actually, it's worse than dating. It's like marriage, because you can't break up with your investor. Almost never, right?
Well, it's a one-way breakup usually.
It is a one-way breakup. Yes, it is a one-way breakup.
All right. Well, Daniel, hopefully that helps. I mean, as Heidi said, it's a very complex thing, but you know, the good news is there are lots of investors out there, and so if someone's not responding to your emails or they're not interested, you know, you move on to the next person and try not to take it too personally. So hopefully that helps. Speaking of which, here's a great one from Jackson. My relationship with my lead investor is not going well. He is a total backseat driver and calls me almost every day. Oh my God. I wasn't expecting this from a major VC firm. Any suggestions on how to handle this situation? So, I don't know if you've ever lived through this.
Exactly. I've lived through this exact
thing. I have,
thing.
and
Yep.
it sucks. So, what would you say to Jackson in a case like this?
So every case is different, and sometimes it's not fixable. Sorry to say.
Yep.
But I would say the best approach is always the direct, honest approach. And in a non-threatening, not an environment where there are other people in the room, like don't do this at a board meeting, right? But
On the record.
Go have a coffee or a beer or whatever it is with the other person and say, I'm finding this really difficult because I'm trying to run my business and I really respect your input, but there's a point at which it's, I'm finding it difficult. So work with me here. What is the problem you're trying to solve? I'll just say, I had this very thing with Ann Winblad, right? And Ann was former operating person, right? Just raised a venture fund, and I was her very first deal.
Yep.
Right?
Very common situation.
Very first deal, and I'm sorry, this is how old I am. She was faxing me every day. Okay?
With
so she was,
questions or
with stuff.
Yeah.
Just stuff,
Yeah.
like questions, ideas, articles of interest, whatever, right? And I finally said to her, Ann, am I supposed to respond to all of this? Because if I do, 25% of my job will just be answering you.
Yeah.
And that's not a good thing. And she's like, oh, no, you know what? I was just trying to inform you. And I said, okay, well, we need to work out a different way. So in fact, one of the things I will do as a VC, because I do want to communicate with entrepreneurs, but I don't want to overwhelm, I don't want to be a pain in the ass, right? So I tell them, look, I'll use email. And if you're in the to line, it means I really care. If you're in the CC line, it means whatever.
FYI.
And if I say FYI, it really means I don't expect a response, right? Just
that's good.
develop that shorthand so that you can communicate with each other. But that said, unfortunately, some VCs are the frustrating operating people. I call it put me in coach syndrome. It's like, put me in coach. Just let me go do it. Let me go fix this thing. And they want to be there. And then sometimes what you don't see on the other side is they may have partners who are in their face. Like, well, what are the terms of that? Well, why is the quarter slipping? Well, what is what is line 37G on this spreadsheet? Why is it off by 1.4%? And they have to answer to someone.
Yeah.
And sometimes if you sit down and say, what is the problem you're trying to solve? Sometimes they will say, my partners are on me all the time, right? They're on me about this. And you can say, well, what can I do to help you get the information so that you're not, on me all the time?
Well, it's funny you mentioned the operators who become investors.
Mm-hmm.
I had that exact situation with a mutual acquaintance of ours, and it's like, you want to run this thing instead of me? Like, go for it. But otherwise we gotta get to a new normal.
And that's the hard part, though, is your natural tendency is to say exactly that.
Yeah.
Dude, let me do my job, right?
Yeah.
You want to run this for me? But here's the problem is sometimes they kind of do want to run it for you.
Yeah.
So I think that the challenge is how you, in a nice way, say, this is just kind of overwhelming. It also, and depending on how they do it, the thing that's the worst is if they do it in front of your management team, right? And then it sort of debases your ability to manage. And so I think that's the other thing is if you can try to get your investor to understand the negative influence they're having on your ability to deliver a return on the investment, that's how you speak to them through their pocketbooks.
Absolutely.
Or their wallets.
And Jackson, the other thing I'd say is, if you have some advisors or, people you're close with, maybe talk with them, or if there are multiple investors on the board, maybe talk with the other investors and just attack it head on, try not to be defensive. And, based on what I read here, it's not sounding good. So be ready. But hopefully we've given you a few things that might help you out a little bit. All right. Well, next one is from Molly. I'm a designer at a public internet company and would like to become a startup founder. What advice would you give me for finding the right idea and partners to work with? So Yahoo, Google, it's probably some big company, right?
But I think this is the thing is you have to ask yourself first, why do you want to be a founder? Do you want to be a founder because you want to work in a small company? Do you want to be a founder because you want to set the culture? Do you want to be a founder because you want to call the shots? Do you want to be a founder because you think it's the fastest way to get rich? If that's your reason, don't be a founder, because mostly that doesn't work.
Fastest way to lose money.
But I think you have to think about why. Because, and I see this at Stanford all the time. In fact, we joke at Stanford, FOMO, fear of missing out.
Yeah.
At Stanford, they have FONSU, fear of not starting up. It's like if you go get a job, there's something wrong with you. It's like not everyone should start their own company.
Yeah.
And a lot of times students will come to me and they go, I want to be an entrepreneur. And I'll say, why? And they'll say, because I want to be an entrepreneur. I'm like, no, what problem are you trying to solve? Well, I don't know. Whatever problem. I don't know. I just want to be an entrepreneur. So that doesn't work. I mean, I think that the thing is, if you see a problem that you want to solve, then go try to solve it. If you think you would like that environment, go, the wonderful thing about, again, today's environment is Kickstarter, AngelList, all over the place. Gus, there's startups listed everywhere. And it's one of the things, AngelList is, I think they do as much human capital development as they do funding, right?
Absolutely.
People go want to work for those places. And so get to know, find somebody who's doing something you feel passionate about and go talk them into letting you work. I mean, it sounds like you have a designer. I mean, those are like super, like everybody wants designers. So hopefully there is that opportunity. If you want to start your own thing, I mean, then the question goes back to that thing of, do you want to build a company and, raise capital, or do you want to have I'm going to use this word, lifestyle business? Entrepreneurs in the Valley puke on me when I say lifestyle. I'm like, you know what? It's not so bad. Like, I kind of have a lifestyle business, right? I do my boards, and I teach at Stanford, and I work in venture, and I've composed a thing because I have a lifestyle that I like, right? I like to work with interesting people. I like to do these other things. I've optimized for that. Lifestyle businesses are not dirty words, right? People might, you can be an independent graphic designer. You can pull together with 3 or 4 others and do a virtual graphic design. My webmaster, Greg. Hi, Greg, if you're out there. Greg lives in Portland, right? I haven't seen Greg in 10 years. He probably would walk by me on the street and I wouldn't know. Well, I get his Christmas card. So I still know what Greg looks like. But, Greg moved out of the Valley and he went and he set up his own kind of consultancy in Portland because he wanted to go raise his family there, buy a bigger house, that sort of thing. There are all sorts of ways to have a successful career, and almost none of them involve raising venture. But in the Valley, sort of, if you have one that involves raising venture, that's great, but not all of them do.
Yeah. No, that's great. And it's like the guy you mentioned who had done 6 weeks of research, right?
Yes.
Like, that sounds like somebody who was doing a startup because that was the cool thing to do.
Right. I mean, this is a little bit the issue that we have with a lot of the startup programs. And some of the startup programs have great things coming out of them. So don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But when you tell people, here's $5,000 and 6 weeks, solve a problem and get to a minimally viable product, you are going to solve easy problems, right? And you are often going to solve first world problems that people like you have, right?
Yeah.
There's a wonderful entrepreneur who has this thing called Support Pay. It's a great company. It's like Quicken for child support. And there's really no competition. And you're like, why is there no competition? Well, because 25-year-old guys don't pay child support, most of them, yet, at least in the Valley.
Yep.
And so it's like this kind of funny, like what we find coming out of a lot of some of the incubators is they're trying to solve easy, quick problems. But the problem with that is, well, they're easy, quick problems. They're usually not worth a lot, and lots of other people are trying to solve those same easy, quick problems.
Yeah.
And so I really would encourage you, if you're going to start a company, to really think about what can I do that speaks to me, that I can be passionate about, that I can do for years, because it takes years, and that is sort of hard, actually. Because if it's too easy, everybody else is going to do it too.
Sounds good. Well, Molly, hopefully that helps a little bit. Good luck with the decision, and I hope you figure it out. Let's see. We have a question here from Mark. I'm working on starting a company with 2 other founders. How would you recommend we split the equity? 33, 33, 33, or maybe more for the CEO, 50, 25, 25?
I have the answer, and none of those numbers are right.
Oh, okay.
Because there's math that engineers have to do that's very hard. And I, as an English major, have to teach engineers this math. I say this joking, obviously. But there's only ever 100%. Ever. Can't make more of it. When you make more, you dilute everybody else.
Right.
So when you found a company, you don't split it a third, a third, a third. You don't split it 50, 25, 25. It's a negotiation, first of all. You have to split it in the way of who's contributing, who's, whatever. It's a negotiation. Often people do it a third, a third, a third, which is fine. But you don't actually split the company in 3, and then every time you have a decision, you have to do more. You do what I call a life cycle plan for the company, right? And you say there's only ever 100%. Most companies, when they go public, and there's tons of data on this or acquired, the founders own, pick a number. They own 20%, they own 30%, they own 50%, they own something. What's the reasonable number we as founders can expect? A lot of times it depends. Well, how much money do you need to raise to build your company? If you need to raise 10, 20, 30 million dollars, you're not going to own 80% when you're done, right?
Right.
You're going to dilute along
Yep.
the line. But if you think from the very beginning there's only ever 100, we're going to end up with a certain amount, right? Give that amount out, hold the rest of it in reserve, and then the other thing is vest it, right? So again, if you don't know what
Absolutely.
vesting is, read Brad and Jason's book. But the idea is, here's the problem. We start a company right now, we each, 50-50.
Yeah.
And then 3 months
I'd
from
ask
now,
for more, but
okay, you can't
and
have
so
it.
would you, but
You can't have it.
Okay.
3 months from now, you say, I had so much fun in Paris, Heidi. I'm leaving and I'm going to Paris. Well, you now own 50% of my company.
Right.
I am screwed.
Yeah, those are the
right?
worst,
Those are the worst. So instead, it's sort of like, okay, let's start out. Let's each own 5% because we're the 2 that are starting. And then let's each vest on another, I don't care, whatever that number is, for now, over the next 4 years. But if
Right.
one of us leaves, you don't get any more than that.
Yeah.
Or if you get fired, or if you get run over by a bus, or all these bad things can happen.
Right.
And I think if you think about it as start with that 100 and know all the pieces. How much are the employees? How much are you going to give away to employees over time? Again, there's so much data on this that it's actually a beautiful thing. And if you're wrong, the worst what's going to happen to you if you're a little bit wrong is, well, you'll have to issue more shares. You'll all get a little more diluted. But it's much better doing that than giving someone a third of the company, having them move to Buenos Aires, and all of a sudden you're unfundable because a third of your company
Yeah.
is non-productive.
Well, and it happens more often than most people realize,
Yep.
right? Especially like 3 or 4 founders.
Yep.
Within a year, one of those people's gone.
Always.
Like 2 years, maybe half of them. Right?
I would say
So-
even 2 founders, half the time one's gone within a year.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
And if there's 3 or more, you can almost bet on one of them being gone because it just doesn't end up, the stuff is hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we've got about 60 seconds left, so let's do a quick one here. How does DFJ make investment decisions? This is from Tim. Do all of you have to agree to invest in a company?
No.
And you can take a little longer if you need to.
No,
but-
no, no. I'll do it quickly. Usually we are like any other venture firm. It starts with one of the partners getting excited about it, championing it, doing the homework. If they like it, they bring in some of the other partners. We have a look. We might either say, dude, you're smoking something. No. Or, yeah, let's, keep working on it. It is sort of a collaborative effort with one person in the leadership. And then at the end, we have a partner meeting and we vote. And I've only been there 2.5 years, but the joke is if everyone votes yes, it's probably a bad deal. Because if
Yes.
we all think it's a good idea,
Yes.
sometimes it's a really bad idea.
Yes.
You almost always, like, if one or two people go, I don't know, this is weird, it's the weird market or this or that, those are like often the best deals. So it doesn't need to be unanimous.
And there's no like veto or something. That's when you get into partner
But the vote
dynamics.
thing, it's so interesting. It's like, it's not like it's a blind poll. You're sitting in a room, your vote is known, and sure, it's a yes or no. We actually have thumbs up, thumbs down, or sideways. But the point is, there's qualification behind that.
Yep.
And if it's like, you know what, I kind of don't get it, but you love this entrepreneur, I'm going to sideways, but go for it.
Got it.
Versus that person is a criminal.
Yeah.
Like, you can't do this. I'm going to lie down on the tracks and say no because,
Yep.
something, right? It's a negotiation.
All right, well, go pitch Heidi, and you'll find out how it works. I told you it would go fast.
I know, it did. You were right.
See how
You're
it
right. It's
happens?
fun.
So we're out of time. It's great to have Heidi with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
You can follow her on Twitter. Her Twitter handle is @HeidiRoizen, and I'm sure you can Google that and figure it out. Tune in next week for another episode of Founderline. We will have Anne Muraco from Floodgate Fund.
I love Anne.
And Anne's an amazing person. She's an investor in ModCloth and Refinery 29, Lyft, and a bunch of other companies as well. Another Stanford professor / educator. So it'll be a great show. It's next Thursday at 5 o'clock Pacific time. Thank you once again to our fantastic sponsors, Ustream and Oric. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @Founderline. You can send us questions for Anne to help@founderline.com. Also, go to our website and you can sign up for email updates where we'll tell you about upcoming guests and what's happening on the show. And you can also subscribe to our podcast on iTunes. Thanks for watching. Here's to the crazy ones, and we'll see you again next week.